You know, ideas are really easy to come up with. I just don't get how people struggle with writer's block or sampling other people's music in their own, or not creating culinary dishes that have never been seen before by anyone ever. It's so easy. Watch, I'll demonstrate. Yeah, it's not hard. Let's do it. Let's go. I'm gonna show you. It's not hard. All you gotta do. Take egg. Egg is good. Take, cinnamon. Cinnamon is good. Cool, ready? Turn the video. Okay, maybe constantly producing fresh ideas is a little harder to do than I anticipated. Could it be that artists who seem to rip off other works of media aren't really ripping anything off at all? Rather, they're merely taking inspiration? And in actuality, it could be argued that there's no such thing as an original work of art because everything is inspired from at least something else? Video games are an all-encompassing medium. There are so many different types and genres that every concept has got to have at least been attempted once. I'd say that's a safe bet. I mean, that's why genres are a thing to begin with, right? Puzzle games are focused on discovering the answer to some sort of brain teaser or challenge. Racing games are all about trying to be the first one to a specific point. Platformers are built around increasingly difficult dexterity challenges that require you to guide some sort of character under your control. Role-playing games are long investments that take you on a journey through a fleshed-out world with a party of heroes that will eventually get stronger. Shooters are, well, you shoot stuff. Most would say that games can be broken down into archetypes like this more often than not, but game developers are creative people. If someone really likes platforming but also puzzles, man, do you have a friend in puzzle platformers. And if you're the kind of sick, twisted individual who likes shooters but also the number-munching fun of RPGs, well, you just hit the jackpot, honestly. What I'm trying to say here is that games who aren't the most original shouldn't be typecast as uninspired. If 480p videos of Through the Fire and the Flames weren't everywhere in 2007, there's a strong possibility that Beat Saber wouldn't exist today. Video games are basically open season when it comes to ideas and mechanics. Some of the most amazing games borrow from other trendsetters that happen to be making the most noise, and some games are inspired completely by the mere existence of another game. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, with the games industry being no different, and I really can't think of a more apt game to discuss when talking about standout games that don't have much of an identity on their own than Respawn Entertainment's Jedi Fallen Order. Man, I feel like I bring this game up all the time in these broad topic videos. I mean, I've only ever played through it once, and it's not to make it sound like I dislike it or that it's a bad game, quite the opposite for both. I think it's a perfectly fun time and a solid title, but man, this is such an unoriginal game. Let's see, if we're looking for Dark Souls DNA, you have the slow, methodical combat, the meditation spots or checkpoint-like nodes throughout the world that are dedicated to respites from hazards and enemies. There's a little Estus flask in your healing item, seeing as it can be upgraded as you go along your journey, and of course it replenishes at those meditation spots. The non-linear world progression has been used and iterated on by many games throughout the years, but it seems very reminiscent of the concept's origins here. Super Metroid. The process of jumping from planet to planet and finding upgrades and traversal tools that can be used on other planets to do the same thing is very reminiscent of Super Metroid. Only instead of jumping between planets, it was navigating to different areas on planet Zebes. And is a single-player action-adventure game these days really worth selling if you don't have any climbing sections? The train section from the beginning of the game feels like it was taken directly from Uncharted 2. Avoiding aircraft fire behind cover, climbing on the sides, things breaking when you climb on them, the pieces just fit. And this section on Kashyyyk? Yeah, you're not fooling anyone, Respawn. This was obviously inspired by Sonic 4 Episode 1. Fallen Order is still such a fun game though. The force powers may not be as crazy as other Star Wars games have gotten, but these things are never not fun to use. I don't know what took them so long to put a Jedi in a grounded third-person melee combat system, but I'm thankful it's finally here. It might not be the most rewarding or deep, but everything just adds up to a good time. And besides, you name another game where I can have this many ponchos to wear whenever I want. Still waiting on my fedora, Vince. Where is it at, bro? And that's all you can ask for, honestly. At least it's trying to be a more unique take on Star Wars than the games that came before it. Like, what kind of leverage do you give something like, Among Us? I suppose you could make the argument that it's a more interesting take on the usual game of whodunit, of which there have been several games to take the concept of a single group of terrorists, imposters, criminals, what have you, and ask them to socially engage with all of the other players who are the civilians or crewmates or innocents or that type of thing. The goal is to keep an eye on the suspicious ones, maybe catch someone in the act of murder, and most importantly, vocally converse with them to see what they say.
That's pretty sus, bro. That's pretty sus.
Why do you seem like a terrorist, Butter?
Butter? That's not epic. That was not epic. Why did you do that?
The trendsetter here was TTT, or Trouble in Terrorist Town, from the popular game Garry's Mod, which itself evolved from a Half-Life 2 mod called Zombie Master. But personally, my favorite way to play this game type is in Pavlov VR. These games require you to use your microphone to actually talk with the other players to deduce who is suspicious and potentially guilty. The small, nervous movements and liars stuttering is way more fun to pick up on when you're standing right in front of someone in VR.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it.
These games also introduced the idea of a detective, a player whose job in the match is to try and find out who the terrorists are. They have access to special gadgets to help them, and it also helps that they're immediately the only proven member of the entire game, thus becoming the one who innocent players flock to because of the instant trust, as well as an instant target for the terrorists. But Inner Sloth's sleeper hit Among Us plays the game a bit differently. At the beginning of each round, crewmates are told to...
Hey, Ross.
Hi, Colby.
Everybody mute.
Players in the same room are to shut their mouths, and players online are to mute their mics indefinitely. This creates an admittedly interesting dynamic for this kind of game, where you're all still easily within reach of each other, but the feeling of isolation just got far more real. Walking down a long, dark corridor alone now really feels like this lonely, dangerous trek. One where you don't know if the next corner will contain the task you need to complete or your assailant. I would be lying if I was to say that I find this more engaging than Pavlov, but it's far more available. VR is very limited by its price point, as well as that's the only platform you can experience it on. But Among Us is currently on almost everything under the sun, with a VR version ironically on the way. I currently have 3 of the releases because my family likes to play together when we can, and I don't regret any of the purchases. And for that reason, Among Us makes for a great addition to your repertoire of party games, similar to a Mario Party or something of the sort, where the mechanics are simple to understand but still engaging enough to be enjoyed by anyone on a fun evening. Unless your friends are a bunch of goons like mine.
I don't know. The only person I saw was Not Ross. I don't know who the hell that is, but I saw Not Ross.
That's me.
Okay.
What? Shut up, Carter.
Wait, no, sorry, I'm not Ross. I'm not Ross. I'm better Ross.
You're better Ross.
This is stupid. Be real names.
Who's green? Who's I am Ross?
That's me.
That's Kason.
That's me.
I'm Ross.
Who the fuck? What the f?
Who's
Wait,
Casey?
who's Jason then?
I don't know.
I don't know, dude. I don't know what's happening here.
Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have something like Shadow of Mordor, a game that even before it saw release was being compared to other standout titles at the time. Even with all these comparisons, it went on to be one of the best-selling and performing games of the 8th generation of consoles. Nonetheless, the haters were still there. Of course, it has its own original ideas here and there, but much like Fallen Order, it borrows a whole lot from other successful games before it, throwing them all in an easily recognizable and easily marketable setting. The original Ass Creed was the game to revolutionize and streamline climbing in video games. Ever since its release in 2007, games from every genre imaginable have been implementing similar systems that allow the player character to effortlessly scale walls and buildings. Is it really fair to criticize Mordor for this if everyone is doing it too?
I know, son. But if all your friends were named Cliff, would you jump off them? I don't think you would.
Probably not, but I also think it digs its own hole a bit deeper by surrounding itself with many other obviously lifted systems and mechanics. The Batman Arkham series had already seen 3 entries at this point and had given birth to a new style of combat system. Some people have offered their criticisms of it, but it was inarguably a brilliant way to make the player capable of effortlessly taking hordes of thugs down. And while it could be argued that Assassin's Creed was the one to first implement this counter-based combat system, I think the one in the Arkham series differs itself enough from any jealous assassins within earshot. Others have come in and borrowed from it since then, but our subject seems more deliberate. It's pretty clear that the direct inspiration for the Foundation is Batman. I say this as someone who loves the combat system in Mordor, but I also love it in Arkham. You influence your attack's directions toward an enemy while also keeping an eye out for any counter opportunities that come your way. The stun attack that's followed up by a rapid flurry of strikes is particularly noticeable, seeing as it shares not only a very specific feeling in the moment, but also identical button layouts as Arkham. And after you've achieved a high enough combo, you can hit Y and B for an instant takedown, and it's in your best interest to focus on the baddies with more complex beatdown requirements. I think Mordor does a good job of giving its players tools within the system that have the potential to be more useful in an open world. The shadow strikes and takedowns come to mind as a particular highlight. It's extremely useful in stealth missions to have the ability to warp to your targets while also dispatching them. The combat and stealth systems feel more similar than distinct, but they both hit the mark, so I don't know if anyone will be complaining. Randomly generated runes can be found that buff your stats, and that system would be tedious to nail down to a specific game, because there are plenty of them out there with randomly generated loot. The open world it hosts, well, it's in a similar boat. I would say it could be labeled another checklist game in that regard. Tons of objectives, small and large, peppered around a large map for you to take down, but the variety here isn't as strong. Maybe even the worst aspects of an Assassin's Creed if you want to get specific. You have 3 or 4 of the same objectives to pursue 20 or so times all across the map, plus the abundance of story missions that are often of similar goals. And the few original ideas that Mordor does have are strong highlights. The Nemesis system is a great one. This allows even a small basic enemy that just so happens to get the better of you in a fight to end up climbing through the ranks and getting promotions as they continue to win battles, making them more dangerous for the next time you encounter them. It's really something special watching all these names and faces move around the world independently and progress as you do. Which is why it's so unbelievably sleazy of them to keep this feature for themselves and only themselves after taking so many other ideas for this game. The greedy assholes, but that's a discussion for a different day. Okay, so what do all of these games have in common? You would probably be inclined to say something derogatory such as a lack of original ideas, no creativity, climbing mechanics? And while some of these might be true from a literal perspective, I think you would be missing the entire point. Every single one of these games that I've described here today are approachable. They all have things that have been done before, which may help some see familiarity in a new title. And just like that, a sale was made and a fan created. As we've discussed in a previous video, even the most approachable Dark Souls game in the trilogy can be brutal at times, even with the ability to seek out the most helpful equipment and features. And now with the release of an open world Souls game in Elden Ring, new players are flocking in like seagulls to try this franchise out, thanks to the abundance of new features like summons and NPC summons and all kinds of new great stuff to help new players. But Fallen Order takes it a step further by bringing the most difficult thing about the Souls titles down a few notches. Force powers literally allow you to slow the enemy down for a second, allowing players time to think or just take a moment if they need to before acting. And going even further than that are the difficulty sliders. If the more helpful combat abilities aren't enough, you're more than welcome to make the journey flat out less difficult for yourself. And if someone plays this and enjoys it enough to say, "That was fun, I think I'd like to play that again," but this time they try a harder difficulty. Maybe not immediately, but eventually it's very possible that they might be inclined to try out one of those scary Souls games, finding a new favorite series thanks to a familiar game that's only just kinda similar. Gmod and Pavlov might not be difficult to get a hold on mechanically, but they can be expensive to try out, with gaming PCs and knowledge of how to set one up being a bit more daunting than navigating your Switch's squared out interface. And even understanding how to look for custom game servers and downloading fan-made maps might be intimidating for new players. Among Us inarguably has less cumbersome menus and methods of getting matches going than these two, however. Not to mention the comfort the majority audience feels when using their phones as opposed to hulking a computer or strapping on a headset. And the exodia of all arguments, it's free, dog. And Shadow of Mordor is the ultimate example of this kind of thing. It's got so many easy to understand concepts and mechanics that it's kind of hard to not enjoy yourself at least a little bit. An easy to navigate open world with several tick box objectives to make the player feel like they're always accomplishing something, visceral combat that isn't entirely shallow but not deep enough to be off-putting, freedom to climb most anything and everything so people have options on how they want to approach challenges, and RPG elements for those numberheads out there. All of these spare parts taken from other games and combined under, yet again, a familiar property like the Lord of the Rings umbrella makes for one bulletproof blueprint. One that did what it set out to do by debuting at number 2 in the UK retail software sales charts in its first week on the market, as well as being the 9th best-selling game in the United States a month after it was released. And just to clarify, while it's awesome that these games exist, and it's awesome that gaming has accumulated such a catalog of ideas and lessons for new developers to learn from, we have to make sure that we're also pushing forward with new ideas to keep ourselves from plateauing. Strive to always blaze new trails and never get too comfortable, as well as not being afraid to take inspiration when you can. And at the end of the day, don't be afraid to just start that project, even if you have to borrow some materials to get going. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.